Hi, this is Robin, and this video is actually going to be a short one. It is going to be the third bonus demo, is what I'm calling it, as a sequel to my workshop that I just released recently on how to create selections of intricately detailed subjects using Photoshop's calculations command. Now, if you haven't looked at that video for a while, or if you're coming into this before you get to that main video, just a reminder that the calculations command lets users select highly intricate objects by blending two color channels in order to create a third contrasty black and white channel, which is called an alpha channel. Now, that black and white channel can be used as a mask or a selection in Photoshop. In my original video on this topic, I introduced the Photoshop calculations command, said what it was, how it works, and walked through two step-by-step demos showing how to use it with both the add and subtract blending modes using the same color channel. And it didn't matter whether that was the red, green, or blue. I had both of the color channels the same. After some comments and observations in that video from some of the viewers, I decided to put together this extra demo. I had actually cut it because of time length before, so that's why we're getting the sequel here. So in this extra demo, I'm going to show you how you can also mix different color channels between the two image sources versus using the same color channel, and also use blending modes other than add or subtract in order to create selections and masks. So what I will do is, because this is a sequel and it's, just one demo, I'll include a link to the initial video in the description below this video, because I'm not going to go into all the details and background information on the calculations command here that I did there. This demo, this is the third demo, it just picks up where the original video stopped. Okay, so I hope that's not confusing. The other thing that there was a comment about in one of my other videos was asking if I could post links to the stock images that I use for these demos, so that if somebody wanted to try working with the same image and following the same steps, they could do so. So it's always a question of, what the licensing rights are for the images that I'm using. But the images I'm going to use here are from a stock site called Unsplash. So what I will do is I will post the links to the Unsplash stock images that I use in this demo, and you may have to set up a free account with Unsplash if you want to access those images and then follow the same steps. I'm going to take a drink. So hopefully that's not an issue. I have no affiliation with Unsplash. It's just a source I use when I want stock images. Okay, so motivation for me choosing this image, given that we're going to work with the calculations command again. So I chose it because this model has very curly hair, as you can see here. Let me see if I can zoom in even a little bit more. Okay, so she has very curly hair and even like little frizzy ends to it. She's got these loose tendrils of hair that are coming down. She's got these delicate earrings. Parts of the stem and parts of her glasses are very delicate. And then there's also some of this webbing in the background. I haven't quite figured it out, but I think she might be in the sidecar to a motorcycle or something. So that's, what that is part of there. If I stretch this out, maybe we can see. So that's why I chose this image, because there are a lot of little intricate or complex details that the calculations command should be optimized for. So what I wanted to do before jumping into the step-by-step demo with the calculations command to see how it does with this image is, let's just create an experiment here, a reference image using another tool in Photoshop, and then we can compare it at the end after I get the mask made for this using calculations, and see which is a more effective tool for this kind of an image. I also like the fact that the other two demos had things that were mostly architectural, so since a lot of people like to shoot portraits and do things with changing backgrounds on portraits and stuff, I just thought it'd be good to try this. So the first thing that I always recommend we do is duplicate the background layer. You can, in the layers panel, either drag it to the left click and drag it to the bottom of the layers panel to this box with the plus, which is the add new layer icon, or with that layer highlighted, you can do a Control or Command J. That's what I'm going to do to jump that up to its own layer, and then I will just label this to say background copy. Okay, so there's nothing modified on that. It's just a copy of this. So there were two ways to create that. So what I want to use for this reference mask to see how things turn out is to first of all start with select subject. And so to work with select subject, you need to have one of the selection tools from your toolbar active. Your toolbar might be on the left, mine is docked right. I'm going to use the object selection tool, which is this box with the arrow going into it. I just left clicked on it. You can see the black box behind it that says it's active. And then with that tool active, I'm going to click on select subject. And Photoshop should be thinking, if you look inside my highlighter there, yes, okay. So now it has created a marching ants selection around what it perceives to be the subject. So now I'm going to go directly into up at the top of the interface here, select and mask, because that's the interface you can use to refine selections. So I'm going to left click on that. And we are now, as you see, it looks different in the select and mask interface. Now, again, I'm going to come to the top of the interface, and because we're interested in all the details in her hair, I'm going to left click on refine hair. It did a quick little zip and it's already done its thing. And then I'm going to come to this right-hand properties panel, come down all the way to the bottom to where it says output to. And I'm going to change it from selection, click on that little arrow, and I'm going to output this as a new layer with layer mask, and left click on that and click OK. All right, so now you can see we have a new layer here, and this is, I will label this 2. So this is a select subject plus refine hair. And that was in select and mask. Okay, so now I'm going to hit Alter Option and just look at this mask, and you can see, what it has done with her curly hair and how it has handled these tendrils in her glasses. Now you'll see right off the bat, the select subject and the refine did not pick up all that webbing in that vehicle or sidecar, or wherever she is, whatever that is. It didn't pick any of that up, but this is how it handled her hair and the delicate details here. So I will Option and Alt click again there, and I am going to turn the eye visibility on that off, and then we'll just save that for later to use as comparison. So now we'll get into the actual demo number 3 of using 2 different color channels and a blend mode other than add and subtract with Photoshop's calculation command. Okay, so we've got this all duplicated with this background copy active, so left click on it, be sure it's highlighted, go to the top of the interface to the image menu and come down to calculations, so image calculations and left click. Okay, and now we get the calculations dialog box that pops up here, and you can see, as it did in the other 2 demos before this one, it immediately turns your image to black and white and converts your image to black and white. Now, let's just go through these different boxes and categories of things that we can adjust in this dialog box. So the first thing is I'm going to say change your blending mode to normal, because what happens is this blending mode setting is what they refer to as sticky. It remembers whatever settings you've used from working with previous images. So let's just get it back to a normal, non-biased, as it were, blending mode here. Okay, so again, just as a refresher, I am only going to work with a single image. So I've got source 1 and source 2 are the file that I'm working with. So that's the stock photo here. And then we get to choose the layer that we want to work with. Merged means, again, I explained this before too, if you have a bunch of layers, then it looks at them as a whole and works on that. But I want to just work with this background copy. So you can click that down arrow, and I'm going to say work with the background copy as my layer, which coordinates with this, and you can see it automatically populates it there since we're using the same sources. All right, so now the next things we have to be aware of here is that I am, well, as I said, I'm setting this to normal. And the thing is, the blending modes that we used here, just to, before I get into the rest of the stuff here, just to mention how they work, there are 20 or so blending modes. Here you can see them all. Okay, and what the blending modes do is that they make the layers or the channels interact with each other. So depending on the blending mode that you use, and that's why I wanted to put it back to this neutral normal, depending on the blending mode you use, it will react differently depending on the photo that you use and the colors that are used. And when we apply this blending mode, it is going to be applied to source number 2. So the calculations command actually predated layers. So if you were thinking about these as layers, this would be source number 1 and this would be source number 2. So your blending mode would be applied to the higher layer, in other words, the higher number in this case, and then it would affect whatever came before it also. All right, so that's a little bit of an explanation about that. All right, so in source number 1, what we want to do here, back up here, now that we're coming down to the channel, we've got the other things set, is we want to identify the channel with the starkest contrast in order to help Photoshop find image details and make a really clean selection or a really accurate selection. So let's just start. So here's how it looks for this image with the red color channel. So what we want to see is, can we beat this? Can we do better than this? Let me maybe pull her hair down a little bit since that's the vital thing. See if we can get darker and more details, because you don't want to sacrifice one or the other. All right, so there's a red channel, and then you can see there's a down arrow. We can click and try the green channel. Oh, that looks like it got darker. Yes. So the green definitely got darker, and we're not losing any of these little details here, so that's a good thing. And generally, the green channel typically is the color channel where you will find most edge detail in photos. Blue is not so much. It's usually best to be used to detect noise artifacts. So your red and your green are probably going to be your most effective channels. So let's just see if this bears out. So there's green. Let's see what happens with blue. Yeah, see, so blue is not so good. So we're going to go back to green. So for source number 1, I'm going to use the green color channel. All right. And then now let's come down to source number 2. And again, if you want to use a different image, you just would have to, in the layer stack, you would have to be sure that they have the same pixel resolution or pixel dimensions in order for calculations to work properly. All right, so now in source number 2, I said I wanted to use a different color channel. So here's the red, and we could use blue, but because I said it really is mostly optimized for finding noise detail, since we used green there, let's use red here. All right. Now, another thing that you can play with, you can try it and see how it works for you, and it depends on how you want to use your mask. You can come back here to source number 1, and you see this invert, you can click there and make it white. So if you want to create a white mask or just see something better to be able to work with it using the white, you can do that. But for mine, I'm just going to leave it so that it's darker that way. Okay, so now after we have the color channels established, which we do for source 1 and source 2, and as I said, I'm using different color channels this time as opposed to the last two demos. Now we want to come to the blending modes and figure out which is going to give, again, a starker contrast with enough darkness but retain or differentiation, let me put it that way, between the darkness and the brightness, but retain the image details. So we're going to click here where it says blending, and all you have to do is hover over these. You don't have to click anything. So there's the darken blend mode. So multiply definitely is better than darken. Okay, so that's one option to keep in mind is multiply, and you can see it's retained all the little details and the sharpness of them. There's color burn. Now color burn loses details. There's linear burn. So I like that you're seeing all the little hairs and details, and it really is giving good contrast to all these things that are, there's darker color. Now that's not as good. We'll skip these. So with blend modes, you can probably see, if you're not familiar, that they're clustered into like things. So these are the darkening ones, these are the lightening ones, then we get down into the contrast ones. And so we definitely don't want it lighter, so I'm going to skip over those. And overlay is pretty good. Let's see. Okay, so overlay is making the background a starker white, but it doesn't have as many hair details as soft light, so I like soft light better. And that's not good. You're losing too much detail. No, so those, all right. So those, so of the ones we just hovered over here, I would say that multiply, linear burn, and soft light were the best ones. And I'm torn between multiply and linear burn, but I've used linear burn for other images and liked it, so I'm going to go with linear burn for this particular image. So the point is you won't always have the same effect, and that's why I was mentioning that the blending modes work differently depending on the image, depending on the colors, depending on the channels you've chosen. So just experiment for your image if you're not working with this one to see which blending mode produces the best result. Okay, then we come down to where it says opacity. Now, opacity refers to some percent of source number one up here. Okay, and again, it's called calculations for a reason. There's a lot of behind the scenes math involved with this, and you don't have to sit there with a calculator or whatever. But I typically leave my opacity set to 100% and I don't change it. And again, it would be affecting source number one. If you lower it to 50%, all you'd have to do is highlight it, click on it, and type the number. Then what you get is an equal split between the channels. So between whatever green and red or whichever color channels you're using, there'll be an equal split in the math that's used between them, but it will skew slightly towards more contrast. If you change the opacity percent to 75%, then source one is combined with 25% of source two to get you the 100%, so 75-25. Okay, and typically that will give you more detail but less contrast. So it's sort of a trade-off analysis. So I just tend to leave my opacity set to 100%, but I just want to mention it. So if you want to experiment with it, you can. Mask relates again to source number one, and I'm not going to work with it here, so we'll just skip past that. So once you get your settings here the way you like them in this calculations dialog box, then just click OK to accept them. And what you'll see is the same thing you saw in the previous two demos in the previous video. Calculations has added a pink overlay to your background copy, to the copy that you use to make the calculations in the layers panel. It has also put a alpha channel into your channels panel. So I'm going to move across. So again, your layers and channels might be down here, or if you don't see channels, just a reminder from the other video, if you go to Window at the top of your interface and come down to Channels and click on it, then your channels panel will be visible. So now I'm going to move from the layers panel to the channels panel, to see the alpha channel that was generated right here by the calculations command. Now, what I want to do is I want to make this, and let me get the rest of the image showing. I want to get this a little bit cleaner so that I can have a purely black and white image. I want this to sort of become a stencil or a silhouette, if you will, of her and the objects in this against a purely white background, okay? So because the way I want to use my mask is to work with her and her context as a whole. Now, let's say you just wanted to color somebody's hair. Well, then you would just have to be sure that only the hair is the distinctively masked feature, because we're ultimately going to use what we're creating here as a mask. So I'm going to kind of call it a pre-mask, and I'm sure there's a technical term that's correct that I'm not using, but I'll just refer to this alpha channel as a pre-mask because we're going to doctor it to try to get it so it can be used as a mask. Okay, so before we go doing any kind of doctoring or modifying this alpha channel, let's duplicate it. So if something goes south, you can discard it into the little trash can icon there and then start over. So bottom of your, with this alpha channel in your channels panel, left click on it and drag it to the box with the plus, which is the add new channel icon. And there you go, you see we've got a copy. So let's do any modifying that we're going to do on this copy. Now, of course, how you doctor it, as I said, will really depend on how you want to use your image and your mask, but this is how I'm going to use mine. I already told you how I was going to do that. So let's get started here. So first of all, I want to get rid of all this distracting stuff in the background because, as I said, I want my background to be white. So I'm going to go to the toolbar, to the rectangular marquee tool, which looks like a little dashed rectangle. I'm left click on that, make sure the black is active, and then I'm going to pull out a rectangle here. So left click and drag. And then I'm going to drag it up to the top of the image because I want to hide all of that. And I'm trying to be careful not to get her hair. And then release. And now what I want to do is fill this selection that was created with the rectangular marquee with white. So there's different ways or whatever you can do this. I'm going to first show you a way to bring up the fill dialog box. So press shift and either backspace or delete. And we get this fill box here, and you can see that you can choose whatever you want to fill it with. And as I said, in my case, I want this to be white for the background, and then click OK. And then once you get it filled, you can do a Control or Command D to turn off the marching ants. Okay, so now you can see we've got this nice crisp white here, but it makes the rest of this look a little dingy. So let me again enlarge and zoom in so I can see what we're doing, because in doing what I'm going to do here, I don't want to lose the detail in her hair. So I'm going to suggest that we open a layers panel next here in order to make the rest of this image in the background more white. So that's a Control or Command and L for levels. And then that brings up this levels box that we can work with. And you'll see that it has the black, it's just like a regular histogram. There's a black handle, a midtones handle, and a white handle. So since we want to make this background, at least in this image, more white, I'm going to pull that handle a little to the right gradually. Let me move this up out of the way so you can see if it's working. Pull this a little gradually, slowly to the left. Did I say to the right? We want to pull the right handle to the left. And just, watch your image and be sure you're not losing any detail as you do that. Now, of course, it's lost a little bit of her arm here. So and sometimes it takes a little jiggering back and forth. So then let's see what happens with the midtones. Okay, because I'm trying to bring back some of the detail in it. So I'm watching her arms, I'm watching her hair, and I'm just looking to see, and I usually just go back and forth. It's very experimental. And then we can just try the black handle here too and see if that helps anything. Okay, so this is going to be a challenge. Sorry, it is a channel also, because this was sort of blown highlights on her arm, but we're not going to worry about it for now. It's for purposes of the demo, I'm just showing you this is how you can modify and clean up your outfit channel so it will become an effective mask. So once you get yours clean the way you want, you click OK, and that gets applied there. So now let's maybe move down to the rest of this image. So I want to continue now so that she is entirely in black and her context is entirely in black. So the next thing I'm going to try to work with here is in the toolbar, I'm going to go to the lasso tool, which looks like a little lasso right there. And again, we're still working on this alpha copy. So click on that if you want to work with that. And I'm going to pull this down a little bit and then just draw a loose lasso, not too close to the ends there. And I'm not going to go over on her arm. And I'm going to come down onto her face where there's white, because again, as we use this as a mask, anything that is white will get affected by any layer adjustments. And I don't want whatever's going on in the background happening to her face or things on her body too. Okay, so now we've made a closed selection with the lasso tool. A moment ago, I showed you how to use Shift and Backspace or Delete to get the fill box. Let me show you another shortcut. Hopefully I have the right ones that you can do just to use either in your color picker, the foreground color or the background color. I want to fill with the foreground color here, so I believe it's Alt or Option and Backspace or Delete. So let's try that. Yep. Okay, good. It's always nice when it works. And then once you get that filled, then you can do a Control or Command D to get rid of the marching ants. Okay, so then I'll come down to her body, and again, still with the lasso tool, I'm going to grab some of these other areas, and again, not going right up to the edge. And I'm going to come outside here. And I'm going to come here because there's white. I don't want, again, this is all supposed to be black. Now I think this is part of her outfit here, so I will go here and you can see I'm not going super close to the edges. Okay, so that whole area there I want to be black, which is currently the foreground color, so I'll do the Alter Option and Backspace or Delete to fill that with black, and then do a Control or Command D to get rid of the marching ants. Let me see what we've got left here. Okay, so let me just show you one more thing here, and then what I'm going in the cleanup, and then what I'm going to do is pause the video after I show you. I just want to show you a few techniques, but I don't want you to have to gruelingly watch me clean up this whole image. So the next thing I'm going to do is go on the toolbar to the Object Selection tool. Again, that's the box with the arrow into it. And what I'm going to do is just go loosely outside her body, because as I said, I want this to be all black. And then come again just loosely inside, so I'm not right against the edges, because this will snap to edges that it sees, and then release. Okay, well, it only did it down here as opposed to up there too. So what I'm doing is creating a barrier. When you have a selection and you want to paint on it, then you cannot go outside. You can only paint inside that selection. So I'm basically helping myself not go outside the lines when I'm painting. So with that selection there, I'm going to come to the toolbar. Again, mine is on the right, yours is probably on the left, and choose my paintbrush tool, which looks like a little brush. Keeping my black as my foreground color, because this area is supposed to be black. For the brush tool, come up to the options bar at the top of the interface and go to the icon that looks like a brush tip. And I like to paint, I can use this one too here. with the hard brushes, because then we don't get those soft edges that'll spill. Now, granted, it's not going to spill in this case anyway, but anytime I'm trying to paint in areas where I don't want it to spill, I like to use a hard brush. And then I'll just click up in this area up here. Whoops. Too aggressive. All right. So now, let me see if I can move this up. No, I can't. All right. See the little white circle inside the green highlighter? That is my brush tip. So I'm going to use my right bracket key to make that brush a little bit larger. Be sure I'm painting with black, and then just start painting, because I want to fill in this area with black that is part of her body. And you can see, just to show you, look, I'm going out over the white area, and because I've put this selection here, it keeps me limited to the edge of this object. So I can do a Control or Command D to get rid of the marching ants. Let's try the object selection tool again, see if we can do any better this time getting some of this. All right, yeah, so this time you can see it got to that area. So again, back to the brush tool, painting with the black. At least I want black. You do white where you need white. And I'm brushing inside. I'm going to turn my smoothing down because that slows things down. Okay. All right, so now it's helped me stay inside the line, so I'll do a Control or Command D to get rid of that selection that I don't need. All right, so since I've shown you these techniques of using the rectangular marquee and using the selections, using the levels command, I'm going to pause the video for a moment so you don't have to watch me do every little cleanup here, and then I will come back when I've got it cleaned up and we'll pick up from there. Okay, so now you can see that I've finished cleaning this up, and I do see one little point here on our glasses, so maybe I will do that. There we go. All right, so now I have a purely black and white mask that's like a silhouette, or can be used like a stencil. And so now we cannot use directly our channel mask, or as I like to call it, the pre-mask in the layers stack. So what we need to do is, first of all, make a selection active of this alpha channel. So you do a Control or Command and click on the alpha channel, and hopefully you can see that now Photoshop has made all the marching ants active around this as a selection. Then you come to the top of the channels panel, click on the RGB channel. So you can see now it's reactivated the red, green, and blue so that you can see your color image again. And again, you see we're missing her arms, but for the purposes of the demo, I'm not going to worry about this. Probably I would have done some adjustments with luminosity masking or something to get bring down some of the blow and highlights on her arms in a real situation. And I can also see that some of this area that I didn't know if it was part of the sidecar was actually part of her blouse, so we can fix that on the layer mask too. Okay, so now that we have the selection active and we've clicked on the RGB channel, then you can go back to your layers panel. So just left click on that layers tab, come back to your active layer, which is the background copy, and then come to the bottom of the layers panel to this box with the circle, which is the add layer mask. And now you can see we've added the layer mask to the background copy. That should be the same as what we were just creating from the calculations command. Okay, so now we are there. Now, for all intents and purposes, after we have gone through those steps and added the layer mask in the layers panel to the layer, that's the end of the calculations selection process. So but the thing is, we're not making a mask for mask's sake. So you are creating these masks so that you can either make selective enhancements to your image, or using adjustment layers, like down here with these circle, like using some of these adjustment layers, or you want to be able to make a selection of whatever it is. In this case, it would be this woman, and then be able to use it in a composite or, you know, something like that. So, or use it in some other way. So the mask is a means to an end. It's not the end in itself, but this is, that was the end of the channels process. So what I want to do optionally here is say, okay, well, now that I have this mask, what are some things that I could do with it? But maybe before I do that, let's not hold it too long as an exciting thing to find out. Let's see how this mask, so this here is now the calculations command mask that was created. Okay. So let's compare the mask that we got with the calculations command. So again, I'll press Alt or Option and click on the mask to make the mask visible. And then let's compare that to this select subject and refine hair mask. So let's see if I can invert this so we're doing apples to apples here. Okay, so here is the mask that we created with select subject and refine hair in the select and mask interface. So let's just kind of look at the quality of the hair. To me, it looks a little soft. Glasses look a little bit soft or missing. These hair tendrils look a little soft to me. And as I said before, we're completely missing all that area with the netting. So let's see what we were able to do here in the lower layer with the calculations command. So look at the difference. So you can see all the tight curls, you can see the tiny little hairs, you can see perfectly delineated hair tendrils, her earrings, the frame of the glasses. We got all of this webbing over here. And again, you know, it really depends on what you want to use it for, but to me, this is the calculations command mask is clearly the better option when you have a subject or object that is very intricate and detailed. I wouldn't go through all those steps for a simple, straightforward selection that something like the object selection tool could get. Okay, so again, this is a toggle with Alt or Option and click, so you can just show that. And I think what I'll do is just drag this other option down to the trash bin there and get rid of it. And let me make another duplicate copy here. Okay, so let me show you just a couple ways that I might want to try to work with this mask and some things that I could do with it. So first of all, let's say we wanted to color on her and her context here. So I am going to do what? I think I will do a hue and saturation adjustment layer, bottom of the layers panel, go to the circle with the line through it, left click on that, come down to hue and saturation. And again, you don't have to do this, but this is just one adjustment that I think you can play with. So in the properties panel for that hue and saturation layer, again, your property panel might be the top and your layers might be the bottom. I'm going to come down in the properties panel to where it says colorize and click that little box. So now it's wholly colorized this way with whatever color. Then I can start pulling this hue slider to change the color on her. Okay. And so it's easy enough to just change the colors. I tend to like purples or magentas, so let's go there. And then you can add some more, get a little pinker there. Add some saturation with the next slider if you want to. So you can go super saturated or you can go unsaturated, whatever you want. So let me just do enough that it's obvious that she's got some color on her. And then this is a lightness slider. So the more to the right you go, the lighter, the more to the left, the darker. So if you come left, it gets darker, lighter. So again, I want to skew a little darker for her. Okay, so now again, it certainly is impacting the background here. So we just want the color on her. So I'm going to make a copy of this mask. You could also clip it, but I think I'm just going to keep it simple here and clip this layer to this layer. So you can do Alt or Option, keep it depressed, left click on the mask that we created with the calculations command, and just drag it up to that white layer. And when it says replace, you say yes. So now you can see now on the hue and saturation layer, we have that mask. Click on the mask to make it active. You'll know it's active when there's a white frame around it. And again, in the Properties panel for hue and saturation, come down to where it says invert, because again, with masks in Photoshop, whatever is white will be affected by what you're doing on the layer, and whatever is black will not. So since we want her to be colored, we want her to be white. So let's invert the mask, and now you can see that what gets affected by the color is white on the mask. All right, so now she's purple. All right, so again, I don't really care for this background behind her. So something else I might try to do, again, hypothetically, this is, again, just all hypothetical processing stages here beyond the calculations. Let's say I want to put a pure white background behind her. So again, bottom of the layers panel, circle with the line is add adjustment layer, and the very first option is solid color. So you might want to put a solid color behind something to replace it. I'm going to use white, so you click, this is the color picker that comes up. You just pick on anywhere you want on here or anywhere, click on any of these colors that you want to work with. I want it white, so I'll click OK. Now that I've got that, needless to say, we have covered her over. So let's, what did I say? White on a mask reveals and black conceals or hides. So let's make a copy of this original mask and pull it up because we want to affect the background. So Alt or Option, left click on that mask, drag it up to make a copy, and replace layer mask. Yes. And so now we have her colorized from a hue and saturation colorize, and we have her on a new color background, and we have maintained the details from her hair and all these earrings, these little parts of her glasses, all of this webbing in whatever vehicle this is. I think it's a sidecar, but I'm not sure. So that's one example of a way you can process is do some colorization or toning, or again, rather than toning or whatever, you could be using a brightness and contrast. You could be adding a little vibrance. You could be adjusting the exposure. You could be doing some curves. Whatever it is you want to do as an adjustment, you use the mask to do. Okay, so now I'll give you one more example of something else that's more of a composite. So now I'm selecting both of these layers by pressing Shift and clicking on each one of them. And then bottom of the layers panel, I'm going to click on this little icon that looks like a manila folder, and that'll group those layers together. And so that was the colorize plus, let's say, color background replace. It's hard to think and type at the same time. Okay, so the next thing I want to do that I like to do a lot myself is create composites. So let's see if we can come back here. So we'll turn that layer off. So you have to turn that off or the visibility will stay there. I'm coming back to this layer here with the command, calculations command mask on it. And I'm going to try to select her and her context and put them into a completely different scene with any luck here. So we'll do a Control or Command and click on that, and that should select her. Yeah, so you see the marching ants. Now, again, let me just undo that for a moment because, again, I want to select her. So we want to be sure that she is white. So with that mask selected and the white frame around it in the Properties panel for that layer, just let's invert that mask because we want to be working with her and not the background. Okay, so let's try that again. So Control or Command and click on the mask, and now the marching ants should be around her. So now what we want to do is come back to this background layer or a background copy rather, or if you had made it, if you had multiple layers and you're familiar with the terms I used before about making a stamp layer, which is essentially a composite layer of layers that have come before it, go back to one of those layers. I'm going to use my background copy because that's where the full content is. With that layer active, I'm going to do that Control or Command J. Remember, we did that to duplicate and was one of the options to jump her up onto her own layer. So this is the young woman, and let's just call it vehicle. Okay, so now let me just show you. So by doing that, we now have her on her own transparent or empty layer. So we can put other content behind her with that, okay? All right, so now I have this other image sitting here just by coincidence to bring in as a new background, because assuming it's a vehicle of some kind and she's out on the open road. So what we want to do is, again, what I usually like to do is duplicate the background copy. So again, let me just throw this out so I can show you again if you're new to Photoshop. So again, you can click on this layer, drag it to the bottom of the layers panel to the box with the plus and get the duplicate layer, or do a Control Command J to jump that up as a duplicate copy. Then we want to move this image into this layer stack of this image over here. So in your toolbar, click on this little cross, which is the Move tool. Okay, and then we want to click inside the image that we want to move. Left click, keep the mouse button depressed or however you're moving it, and then drag it all the way into this image and then release. Okay, so now we've got this image in this document that the girl is in. Okay, and we can move this around with the Move tool. All right, so what I'm going to do is just move this down closer to where I think it might logically be relative to her. Now, needless to say, a couple things are going on here. One is that it's hiding her, so let's click on that layer and drag it down to the layer below her so that she's in front of that background. Okay, and then with this, let me put this, label this. This is the scenic. Whoops. Scenic new background. All right, so that's no good like that size. So what we have to do is scale this. So before you scale anything, because when you start scaling in Photoshop, you can lose pixels to your image and destroy the integrity of the image if you make them bigger and then smaller and bigger and then smaller. So what you want to do is kind of put it in a protective envelope that will let you do that kind of scaling but not damage the resolution of the image. The way that envelope that you put it in is a smart object. So right click over in the empty space on this new image layer here and go to where it says Convert to Smart Object. So click on that, and what happens is you get this new little icon in the lower part of that box, and that shows you that now this is a smart object. So now we can go to the top of the interface to Edit, down to Transform, and then fly out to Scale. Okay, and if you'll notice now that Edit, Transform, Scale has put this pink bounding box around this image. And let me turn her off for just a moment here. And Transform, Scale. Okay, and what I want to do is I want to retain the aspect ratio. I am using, there's two different methods to do that, or at least two different methods. The old legacy method is you have to press and hold the Shift key when you click on any of these handles to pull, otherwise it'll distort the image. The newer default is just to be able to pull on those handles. So you have to know how you have your interface set. I have mine set to the legacy system, so I have to press and hold Shift when I go to stretch these things out. And I'm just going to pull down and pull up. Okay, and again, this is just a demo to show you that you can create a composite. All right, and then once you get yours transformed the way you like, come to the top of the interface and click the check mark, or I think you can hit enter or return too, but I like to hit that check mark. And then you would put your subject back over there so you have a composite. So now we've been able to use our calculations command generated mask to turn the subject into a selection, make her or make it, whatever your selection is, in this case it's a her, be able to jump it up onto its own transparent layer. Because again, just to understand, where you see transparent pixels, anything lower than that in the layer stack will show through where it's transparent, and she will block the content because she's solid of anything that's below. So anyway, so that is, I think, the end of what I wanted to show you here, which was basically a third demo or a bonus demo or a sequel demo to my previous workshop on how to use the Photoshop calculations command to make selections and masks from intricate or highly detailed subjects. And then in this demo, we did look at using different color channels and different blend modes than we did in the other two demos. So hopefully this will be helpful if you want to go beyond what we showed in that last demo and two demos and experiment in different ways with your images. So have fun experimenting with this.